नमस्कार दर्शक मित्रों। थिंकलाइन के आज के संस्करण में आपका स्वागत है। आज है 3 नवंबर। यह प्रोग्राम आपके पास आएगा 4 नवंबर को। यूएस के इलेक्शंस हो रहे हैं। हाँ, सबको पहले शुभ दीपावली। दीपावली जस्ट खत्म हुई। गुजरातियों का न्यू ईयर भी हो गया कल। हम बात कर रहे हैं ऐसी जियोपॉलिटिक्स की जहां पर काफी लोग रिमलैंड हार्टलैंड की थियरी बात करते हैं, मगर एक चीज जो आम आदमी के समझ में आती है वो, अगर आप वर्ल्ड का मैप ले लें, इफ यू टेक अप द मैप ऑफ द वर्ल्ड एंड यू विल सी देयर आर स्मॉल स्मॉल फायर्स, chaos अक्रॉस द वर्ल्ड। यूक्रेन रशिया में देखिए, वेस्ट एशिया में देखिए, पाकिस्तान अफगानिस्तान में देखिए, भारत तो परपेचुअल, भारत के बाजू में बांग्लादेश तो है ही है। यहां भी एक आग लगाई गई है। और ये सब फायर जो है, that is to create a mess in the world. There is a line of thinking which so many people believe. We are going to talk on that. That there is a party in US. There are some people, some think tanks in US which always think keep the world in fire, keep the world in chaos, so that we'll keep ruling. Our superpower status will continue. And in that, the developing countries will not be allowed to develop the way they should. A lot of things are happening. इनकी बात करने के लिए आज हमारे साथ है डॉक्टर आदित्यन जी. He will have a definite viewpoint on all these things. Doctor साहब, before I ask you the first question, let me begin this. This is elections. Are this going to be a watershed elections in US history and so the world history? Because it looks like, whichever side wins, be it Democrats win, be it Republicans win, other party is not going to accept it. The way it looks like. Because, the people who lecture people, other people, your democracy is that, your democracy is this, they have an attempt on their presidential candidate 3 times. They have university campuses on fire, and still they lecture people on democracy. They put up a stooge named Canada, and they create a lot of trouble with Bharat. But luckily, the Bharat has come out of those, past years white man bogey. And now they are given back the apt reply. And so they are worried. My first question to you is this US election? There's a lot of things going on. We even saw the video clips of, ballot boxes being burnt. And not anywhere else, in Washington, D.C. itself. Well, is that the real form of democracy? What they are practicing about? And who is going to win this election? And whether, along with that, sir, before you start, along with that, whether it is Kamala auntie who wins or Trump uncle who wins, is there anything going to change the world? And with Bharat? Sir.
I think you have posed a lot of questions, and I will try to be much more specific in my answers. Let's start with the state of democracy in United States. United States is not a democracy. It never was. It is a republic. There's a difference between republics and democracy. In democracy, each vote counts. In US elections, each vote does not count. If you look at the concept of presidential elections, they are not direct elections. In any country, if a party gets majority or if a candidate gets majority votes, that candidate is declared as elected. Not in US. And this is not just this time. Over the last 30 years, we have seen that multiple times the person who became president did not win the popular votes. You have this, black hole called Electoral College that decides the laws and the rules that were made to constitute the Electoral College were made in 1776 or 1774. There has not been much change in that system. When US started as a nation state, there were 13 states. Now there are 50 states and a number of other territories that are, or Commonwealth, at least of the Puerto Rico, but it's the same system. And you might have seen that they are saying there are 7 or 8 swing states that will determine the outcome, and that can be as small as like 5,000 votes or 6,000 votes or 10,000 votes. So why do you have the charade of national elections? You can just have, elections in 6 or 7 states that are critical, or in certain counties in those. And the funny thing is that even when those states have voted, the legislatures of those states have the option of not sending the delegates based on the popular vote. They can decide themselves on the delegates. So why have elections? Let the state legislatures send your representatives to the electoral college meeting and choose a president. So there's a saying in Hindi language, Chirag Tale Andhera. And that very beautifully depicts the state or lack of it of democracy in United States. Because I can tell you, the president who did not get popular votes was George W. Bush, president number 43, who lost the popular votes by 500,000. And because of Supreme Court's intervention, when they did not allow recounting, he won the state of Florida and hence the Electoral College by just a few hundred votes. I think 200 votes or 300 votes. Donald J. Trump, who won the presidency in 2016, did not win the popular votes. He was behind, and he and his party will be very, very, pained to accept that fact that he lost 5 million popular votes. And then after becoming president, he made allegations that there were illegal immigrants who voted, 5 million illegal immigrants voted in the election, basically trying to indulge in a face-saving exercise. So when you have situations like this, that at least in last 25 years, people who have won the presidency have not won the popular votes. Where is the will of the people? Why can't you reform the system and have the candidate who wins the popular? Why can't you eliminate this backroom, smoke-filled rooms, decide who is going to be the president by machinations and manipulations, or if I use the word from India, horse trading, post facto, because elections happen on November 4th or November 5th, and then there's a whole sequence of events that happens, how the delegates are to be, who will be the alternate delegates, and how state legislatures get, what happened last time. And the same thing is likely to happen this time also, because if you look at the opinion polls, they are neck to neck. And there are already lawsuits from the Republican side. And if the candidate says that, if I lose the elections, they will not be fair. They will be stolen and rigged. If I win, everything is fine. I mean, that's a very unique position for a candidate to take. Again, as a objective analyst, if you look at United States needs to do reform in its electoral system. In 2020, Mr. Trump was the president, and yet he claimed that his opponents rigged the election. Where was your presidential power if your opponents, despite not being in power, were able to rig the elections? And you know what happened on January 6th, that the mayhem is not just happening now that ballot boxes are being burned. Mayhem also happened on January 6, 2021, when there was a violent uprising that was engineered to change the outcome of the votes in the Senate to prevent somebody being declared as the president, to give threats of hanging the sitting vice president. I think those all things, if you go beyond the political party affiliations, tell you that there's a deep-seated malaise in the electoral system in the United States, and it needs to learn, it needs to have some self-introspection, and rather than finger pointing at other countries that we will not tolerate the election results in Georgia because they are not favorable to us. I'm talking about the
आत्मनिरीक्षण करने की जगह, मैं आपको सीधा साधा बता दूं, आत्मनिरीक्षण करने की जगह ये हमारे अंकल सैम लोगों को नसीहत देते हैं, लोगों को
I mean,
शिखामण देते हैं, बोलते हैं कि जॉर्जिया में चुनाव सही तरह से नहीं हुआ। अरे भैया, आपके यहाँ देखो, आपके यहाँ ही चुनाव नहीं हो रहे हैं,
and you
यहाँ पर
talked
तो
about
दादागिरी हो रही है सर।
you are talk you
माय
are
माय
talked
माय माय
about
एडिशनल क्वेश्चन, आफ्टर
hmm,
द रिजल्ट्स आर आउट, डू यू थिंक द गन्स विल बी आउट, whichever side wins?
without being going into specifics, there will be chaos. There will be chaos. Now, what form it takes place is unpredictable. It depends which party wins, because there are very strong indications that a candidate is not going to accept the election results if they are not in that candidate's favor. And the supporters of that candidate have all the plans to create mayhem and violence. That is very obvious. I don't want to name names, but you will see post-election violence, just like it used to happen in Bharat, in Bihar, and some other states where ballot boxes used to be hijacked and stuffed. Uh, there are silly allegations that voting machines have been pre-programmed so that a particular candidate, you press the button, that vote will not register and go into. It's the same thing, EVM hacking, the allegation by the losing party in India. So we are seeing in a much more concentrated manner in United States what is happening, and it calls for self-introspection. The other thing is that there is no standard for conducted elections in United States. There's no federal uniformity in voting across the United States, because Federal Election Commission does not have that kind of power as CEC in India has. There's uniformity, there's the same procedure everywhere. In United States, every county has its own system because of quote unquote local democracy. Every county has its own laws about accepting certain ballots, the postal ballots, the mail-in ballots, and things like that. So you have basically a recipe for disaster that is going to unfold. And it will be interesting to watch as a dispassionate external observer. I may also add, we were talking about Georgia. I want to bring another example. When a duly elected prime minister was deposed by a military coup sponsored by foreign agencies that has brought an Islamic jihadist government next door to India just because they wanted a base in St. Martin's Island.
यस, बांग्लादेश की बात होती है दोस्तों।
So the rhetoric about democracy is flawed. It is to perpetuate the hegemony of one particular country forever. And in that process, anybody can be sacrificed. I'll give you an example. In 2011, when Barack Hussein Obama was the president, there was this concept of leading from behind. And they let their quote unquote European allies to take lead in Libya. What happened in Libya? And again, the person who was deposed and killed was Colonel Gaddafi. And I'm not a fan of Colonel Gaddafi because the guy was crazy, suffered from bipolar disorder. But the way his government was toppled and what happened to Libya now, that there are three governments that are claiming, and there's chaos, there's civil war going on. It's no longer a unified country. There is no law and order. Why was that done? Lo and behold, Hillary Clinton, who was the Secretary of State, gave a statement that it was done to prevent Libya from unifying Africa because he was proposing that African Union should have its own currency. And they wanted to prevent emergence of African Union, just like a counterbalance to European Union. That was Gaddafi's plan, that once you have a common currency, there will be much more harmony and all that sort of thing. So that so-called crazy person was deposed because he was a tyrant, but he had been in power for a very long period of time. So objective is not to promote democracy. It's only lip service to democracy. And the objective is to safeguard the geopolitical interest to continue to perpetuate hegemony forever.
Now I move a little. This, you made it very, very clear that US is not a democracy. Their objective is to continue leading the geopolitics of the world or shaping the geopolitics. Now the situation where I said, the world is on fire. In every part you go and see, there is fire taking place. Be it West Asia, Iran and Israel. They started and now they want, just before the elections, to go slow. So there is a fixed match, Israel and Iran. You go to Ukraine and Russia, they want to keep it firing. Well, Trump wins, he says he'll stop it, but how long will it? See, the Democrats, here there's a very, very, very conscious debate here taking place in some parts of the world, including in some quarters of India, which says, Democrats, if they are going to lose also, they will create so much of fire in the world. I've just mentioned of two, but there is one that Azerbaijan and Armenia are going on. Then, as you said, Georgia, North Korea has come up. So that the new one that comes, Trump that comes, will keep on doing firefighting for 4 years and will be able to do nothing. Now, this sort of a thing, when you link world's interest with particular country's interest, it becomes, as you said, a very dangerous recipe. Now, in all this, India, or Bharat as we say, because this Hindustan and Bharat are two different terms. And one must realize now Bharat is becoming Bharat, slowly and steadily. It might take a little time.
Let me stop you here because you are jumping in, from one issue to the other, and we don't want to, go in that kind of fast manner. First thing is that we need to understand what is geopolitics. World is not a static place. Conflicts are always there. There was an American sociological thinker and professor, Francis Fukuyama, who wrote a book on, end of history. After the dissolution of Soviet Union in 1991, that everything will be hunky-dory, the history has ended, everyone would be democratic, there will be a liberal order. Well, it does not work like that. The other thing I would say that the US system, you are trying to say that Democrat Party will keep on creating fires. No, both parties are complicit in that. You need to understand that. at the time of 1971 war, which party was in power in United States? It was a Republican presidency, Richard Milhouse Nixon, and his national security advisor and then Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger. What they did, they let Pakistan get away with genocide. It was a Republican party-led government. People somehow do not understand the history. There is evolution in United States also. The other thing is that the pronouncement of one of the political candidates, they are like things written on toilet paper, because that person changes his position every minute. The fact of the matter is that in United States, there is a bureaucratic system that is deeply entrenched. And yes, the White House has some influence, but not so much of influence. And the tenure of a president is 4 years and maybe another term of 4 years. Whereas this bureaucracy is entrenched. It is the bureaucracy that shapes the presidency sometimes. Remember Barack Hussein Obama, who came with a promise to end the war in Iraq,
Created maximum number of wars.
created maximum number of wars, maximum numbers of extrajudicial, extraterritorial assassination. And this guy got the Nobel Peace Prize. You see the irony? So a lot of time we are giving primacy to individuals, because individuals will say anything to win the elections, just like it happens in India. We use a phrase called Mr. Natwar Lal for certain politicians who will say anything to get elected. Whether you want to swear on the head of your children, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that, or I will do this, or I'll do that. Those are the tactics to win the elections, and not really the real policies. Because if a candidate says that I can stop the Ukraine war in one day, that's not going to happen. Bottom line is that world is not a peaceful place. There will always be conflicts. But yes, it is also true that if a superpower is trying to continue to generate conflict to maintain its supremacy. Remember we said about the colonial rulers, divide and rule policy? It's just a manifestation of that. What happened that after Second World War, there was a managed transition as to who was the reigning hegemon. Hegemony transferred from British imperialist government to United States. So as a reigning hegemon, United States would not countenance any threats to its status.
Sir, now
And
the
it
question comes. Sir, when you say this, the question comes. Now today, visually we see the world is moving from a unipolar status to a multipolar status, slowly and steadily. Yes, not in immediate future, but in future it is going to happen. Now, in such a situation, emerging power like Bharat, what should it do? Is it doing the right things by hitting back at Canada? And indirectly hitting back at US, telling them that go to hell. If you are going to play this way, we are not going to play.
I think I quoted somebody posting on the Twitter or X.com that we are in very interesting time. We are changing from a hyper superpower to emerging bipolarity with bipolar characteristics and emerging multipolarity. So we are in an era where there is still a superpower which is weakening and declining. We have nascent multipolarity. We are in the direction of multipolarity, and we have a rising hegemon who wants to threaten the supremacy of the current hegemon and become the superpower. That is the situation. India is not going to be, quote unquote, the reigning hegemon like United States is or what China is aspiring to become. India has no such ambitions. But India is going to emerge as one of the major powers, whether regional or whatever you may say, a benign power. The expression used is Vishwamitra, which is friend of the world, and we have demonstrated that by our conduct during Wuhan virus pandemic when we had Vaccine Maitri Abhiyan, that we helped everyone irrespective of their orientation or ideological considerations. As far as India-Canada spat is concerned, I don't think we are doing enough. Personally, that is my thing. I think the response needs to be much more measured, stronger, and proportionate. We are doing certain things, but that language is not being heard or understood. Canada is a country with which we have perpetual problems. Nothing new. Just remember the Kanishka downing by terrorist acts. The harboring of terrorists, not just in 1 year or 2 years, and not just by this prime minister, by his father, with also, I mean, this guy is from Liberal Party, but also from Conservative Party. Brian Mulroney, who was a prime minister, also, refused to extradite Parminder Singh Talwar, besides Pere Trudeau, the father of Justin Trudeau. So Canada has a history of harboring terrorists, not just from India, from all over the world. They harbored the killer of Mujibur Rahman. They provided safe sanctuary to LTTE terrorists. And they are adopting a wink-wink, nod-nod situation with Pakistan's ISI that is eliminating Baloch activists in Canada on Canadian soil. And of course, it has become very obvious that Liberal Party of Canada and Pere Trudeau himself and his MPs are on the payroll of China. So some of the song and dance drama they are doing is to deflect the attention from Chinese pernicious influence in Canada's domestic policy and politics. It is apparent that Canada does not have any independence geopolitically. For all practical purposes, it is de facto 51st state of United States. Remember, 3 years ago, they arrested the chief financial officer of a Chinese company called Huawei, who was the daughter of the owner of Huawei. And allegation was that as chief financial officer, she violated the United States unilateral sanctions against Iran. It was display of extraterritorial prosecution in a third country. And what happened? She was arrested. She was kept there in Canada for 3 years. What did China do? They arrested few of Canadian business persons and tightened the screws. And ultimately, Canada and its so-called independent legal system had to eat a crow, and a deal was struck and she was let go. Only then Canadian businessmen were released. Why Canada arrested her? Because of a US arrest warrant to Interpol.
तो सर का कहना सीधा साधा है, हम लोग जो भी कर रहे हैं अभी बहुत दिल से कर रहे हैं, वो थोड़ा बंद कर दे, सख्ती करें इनके साथ में, इनके हाई कमिश्नर या जो भी है कैनेडियन एम्बेसी में, उसको बुला के बोले कि भैया ताला लगा रहे हैं हम लोग, चलो फुटो इधर से, इसकी
So
ये सर
the responses should be in economic realm, financial sanctions. The bilateral trade is $8 billion. We are sending students to Canada, and those students go and spend Indian money, Indian foreign exchange there. So we government of India can always put restrictions. No student will go to Canada. You can go anywhere else, but not to Canada. That will be a blow on Canadian this thing. Why can't Indian Parliament pass a resolution declaring Canada as state sponsor of terrorism? So you need to do. We can always downgrade the relationship, diplomatic relationship. We have already withdrawn our High Commissioner. We can withdraw the rest of the 15 diplomats and say that diplomatic relations are suspended for next 6 months till this interference and intrusive behavior, which is violation of Vienna Convention on treatment of diplomats, is rectified. Because if you are surveilling Indian diplomats, you are monitoring their telephone calls or fax messages or text messages or emails, you are violating Vienna Conventions. So, Government of India needs to take a stronger posture, call spade a spade, and let the chips fall wherever they fall.
तो समय आ गया है सर, जो बता रहे हैं बहुत सीधा, कनाडा की बात यहाँ खत्म करेंगे, उससे समझ आ गया है कि अब कनाडा को वड्डा पाकिस्तान कहना शुरू कर दे, और ट्रीटमेंट भी वही, ट्रीटमेंट भी वही, उसके अलावा कुछ नहीं होगा. सर, द लास्ट क्वेश्चन फॉर टुडे. When I'm saying, there's a chaos, there's a mess in the world created by a so-called superpower trying to inflict lot of internal damage to Bharat also, India also. Now, in such a scenario, yes, we do understand that bureaucracy runs the government, policies there in US. It's not a democracy, okay, believed. But this blow cold, or good cop, bad cop policy, what they have been running. Here we have, Eric Garcetti dancing horribly to the tune of, well, Indian instruments and trying to become friends and at the same time threatening us. Now, such a situation, what do you think next 3 years? I'm not talking of long term. Next 2 to 3 years. Because we understand one thing now, GE engines are not going to come. It was due in November. They postponed it to February. It's not going to come. So we'll make our own arrangements. We know how to do it, and we can do it. Are we looking at the sanctions?
So let me clarify to you and your viewers. When we practiced diplomacy, international and geopolitics, we have a number of tools in the toolbox. Traditionally in Bharat, we have said Sam, Dam,
Dand,
Bhed, and all powers indulge those kind of tactics. In modern diplomatic jargon, we say engagement and we say containment. So United States is engaging India in so many initiatives, 2+2 dialogue, ISET, IMEC, quadrilateral security dialogue, okay, all the foundational agreements, blah, blah, blah. Are they just engaging India or they are containing also? So superpowers not just engage or contain, they do a mixture of both. And there's a word for it which was coined by an Afghan American diplomat by name Zalmay Khalilzad, and that is congagement. That you are containing the country while engaging the country. So you're using everything because your ultimate aim is that you manage the rise of this particular country without it becoming too much of a threat to your strategic objectives. I'll give you another example that it's not only United States that does it. 2014, the paramount leader of China, Xi Jinping, was in Ahmedabad, was being fed dhokla and was serenading on a jhula or a swing with India's Prime Minister. What was PLA doing on the border, LAC at that point in time? I will also give you an example. Russia is our time-tested friend. Before Ukraine war, and I'm talking about before February of 2022, what was Russia's behavior? When India took some interest in quadrilateral security dialogue, Russia's posture changed towards Pakistan. They started talking about selling them military hardware, some helicopters, having a gas pipeline through Pakistan, increasing in fact, Sergei Lavrov himself visited Pakistan. Why I'm bringing these examples? It's not country specific. All the major powers indulge in this kind of behavior. Unfortunately, in India, people are highly emotional and myopic. They don't see through. They feel that there is a fidelity like that of a marriage in country to country relationships. It's not like that. Get real, grow up, see what are the strategic objectives, and don't put all your eggs in one basket. Always have a plan B, other options. And for India, as a rising regional power, I won't use the word superpower because we are not there yet. It would be laughable to claim that. We are a rising regional power that is never going to be a vassal state. India needs to have her own military industrial complex. We need to invest in critical technologies, doing our own R&D, and develop our own weapon system so that you don't have 30 squadrons of fighter aircraft when you need 42, and United States or the GE refuses to send engines, and without that you cannot actually do the manufacture of Tejas Mark II fighter aircraft. It is a lesson that you are learning right now. So what is our alternative? We are going to France for Safran engine, we are going to European Union and all that sort of thing. What about Kaveri? Why have we given up? Keep on working on that. Put a capital outlay for a fighter engine, fighter aircraft
So
jet
that's
engine.
happening. That's happening. That's happening.
So
Yeah.
point I'm trying to make is that you have to learn from these mistakes and consolidate it, strengthen your own military defense industrial complex. There's nothing wrong in that. All the major powers do that. Foster public private partnership in the defense sector. Make sure that the defense budget is more than 2.47% of the total national budget. Make sure that one third of the defense budget does not go on salaries and pensions. Isolate by a line item the salaries and pensions in a different aspect of central government's budget so that defense budget is only for defense preparedness, for acquisition of platforms, arms, hardware, all that kind of thing. So we have to have a way of different thinking to strengthen the country. That's not just in the foreign policy conduct, but also domestic reform. And unless we do that, we have to use all the tools, soft power, smart power, hard power, Sam, Dam, Dandabhed, to survive. And if we don't do, they say, civilizations don't die, they commit suicide.
दर्शक मित्रों, बड़ी सीधी बात कर दी डॉक्टर साहब ने कि भारत के पास खुद का मिलिट्री इंडस्ट्रियल कॉम्प्लेक्स होना चाहिए। कहानी शुरू हो गई है, उसकी मैं गारंटी दे सकता हूं, मगर कहानी अभी बहुत इनिशियल स्टेज के ऊपर। जो भारत को चाहिए, जो डॉक्टर साहब ने बताया, बड़ी सीधी बात कही उन्होंने, 42 क्वाड्रन चाहिए, हमारे पास 30 ही है। वजह, हमने किसी एक के ऊपर डिपेंड किया और उनका इरादा हमें कंटेन करने का ही था, एंगेज करके उन्होंने हमें कंटेन। तो मित्रों, ये समझने वाली बात है। आगे जाते जाते हम लोग क्या करेंगे? यस, वी आर डूइंग अ राइट थिंग, वी आर डूइंग सो मेनी थिंग्स, बट दोस थिंग्स आर नॉट इनफ, एंड द स्पीड एट विच वी आर गोइंग needs to increase double fold. If we are looking Bharat, or if we are looking at India being transformed into real Bharat by 2047, we need to quicken our pace. That is what he's trying to say. And मित्रों, आज ये टॉपिक मैंने क्यों लिया पता है? One last comment from Dr. Adityanjee, and then we'll stop with that, and that is chaos, because we are in a very interesting times. We are moving towards something. The entire world is moving towards something. There are indications. There are things which are being witnessed, which are being seen. We know the bloodshed is going to continue for some time. That is also a fact. And many people like me and you, हम लोग ने बात करनी शुरू कर दी है जियो पॉलिटिक्स नहीं, रियल पॉलिटिक्स की बात करते हैं। एंड रियलिटी में क्या हो रहा है वो हम समझने की कोशिश करें। अब जब हम एक बाजू चाबार में भी जाते हैं, हाइफा में भी जाते हैं, और दोनों से उम्मीद रखते हैं कि यहां पे कुछ नहीं होना चाहिए। हम एक साइड को बोलते हैं, हमारे मित्र हैं, कि आप ऑयल फील्ड्स पे बॉम्बिंग नहीं करेंगे। हम दूसरी साइड को कंडोन भी करते हैं। मगर फिर भी आज एक धर्म आधारित काफी राष्ट्रों को हमारे से सहूलियत मिलती है। वो बात भी इतनी सही। रियल पॉलिटिक्स में जाके देखेंगे आप तो समझ में आ जाएगा। हम पैलेस्टाइन को सहाय देते हैं, क्यों देते हैं? टर्किया में नेचुरल कैलामिटी होती है, सबसे पहले भारत जाके खड़ा है। क्यों? जबकि टर्किया ने अभी तक यूनाइटेड नेशंस में, ये एक पिछली बारी की स्पीच को छोड़ दे, कश्मीर में पाकिस्तान का ही समर्थन किया है। हमारे मल्टी मेगा मिलियन फिल्म स्टार टर्की में जाके कुछ करके आते हैं, हम आंख बंद कर लेते। थिंग्स आर हैपनिंग, बट एट द सेम टाइम that is also happening, that swords are out. What I'm trying to say, and I want a comment from Dr. Adityanjee on this for the last time today, that is that, yes, there are a lot of deficiencies. The way, you sitting in US can very clearly say US is not a democracy. They run an autocracy, bureaucratic autocracy, that is what I call it. We have a flawed democracy. That is what some people say. But the fact of the matter is, what was in 2014 is not today in 2024. The swords are really out. Your comment on this last sentence, swords are really out in 2024 when compared to last 10 years.
India or Bharat is on a more confident, more self-assertive path, and the nation will choose her own destiny. And despite external interference, I am very optimistic that the nation will continue to be on the right path. There are always naysayers. There are negative people. From 1947, analysts sitting in the West have predicted breakup of India. On the other hand, personalities sitting in China have hobnobbed with India's enemies again to stimulate and catalyze the process of breakup of India, whether it is in northeast portion of India or supported anti-India governments across process is the same. You don't need to have quote unquote enemies or adversaries. We are talking about real politics. Your friends can also be your, nemesis. Just try to understand that. Ultimately, you have to be your own friend. You have to rely on your own self. Forget about superficial alliances, superficial partnerships. There is a facade optics of multilateral cooperation and this and that, but when push comes to shove, each country is for their own agenda. Unfortunately, in India, people become very emotional. Oh, we have this good relation. They are our friend. It doesn't work like that. It really does not, whether it is United States, whether it is Russian Federation, whether it is Western Europe or EU, whether it is China. So understand what are the motivations of each party, dissect, analyze, go to the root cause. And then based on that, have a very well calibrated, multi-pronged, multi-dimensional response. Talking about Turkey, Turkey was the country that was instrumental in blocking India's membership in Nuclear Suppliers Group. Just don't forget that. Turkey is the country that, along with Pakistan, Italy, is part of United for Consensus, the so-called coffee group that has blocked India's emergence as a permanent member of United Nations Security Council. And last thing, the group of four that India is part of, that includes India, Japan, Brazil, and Germany, that is striving for expansion of United Nations Security Council. What is Germany doing to India? Do we forget that? In fact, India would be much well advised to disband G4 and have its own initiative for permanent membership of Security Council rather than tying it to Japan and Brazil. What Brazil does, they are the voice of the Latin America, but time and again they've stabbed India in back on multilateral issues for perpetuating their own interests. What does Japan do? In Realpolitics, they have been very lukewarm to India, despite Shinzo Abe's changes in thinking. If you look at Japanese posture, it's always dictated by United States. The fools sitting in India always go by emotional responses and are not able to see. In fact, if India wants to become a member of Security Council as a permanent member, you don't tie your membership application with any other countries. So we have to have a dramatic shift in our mentality, our way of thinking, to have critical thinking in strategic spheres. That is where we have been lacking.
दर्शक मित्रों, सीधी सादी बात कह दी डॉक्टर साहब ने। अपनी अपनी मानसिकता चेंज करो। हम विश्व बंधु है, शांति में मानते हैं, सही बात है, मगर आंख दिखाना भी जरूरी, और आंख दिखा के अपना काम कराना भी जरूरी, और यही चीज हमें करनी पड़ेगी। मित्रों, जाने से पहले फिर से आपसे निवेदन करूंगा, प्लीज लाइक शेयर एंड सब्सक्राइब करो। आप चाहे तो हमें सपोर्ट भी कर सकते हैं, आपको पेपैल मिल जाएंगे, डिस्क्रिप्शन में आपको डिटेल्स भी मिल जाएंगी। दर्शक मित्रों, आप ही की सहायता से आपको कैसा लगता है, अगर आप पसंद करते हैं वीडियोस को तो हम ग्रो करते हैं, नहीं पसंद करते तो सुनते हैं। बस इतना ही फिर से कहूंगा, प्लीज लाइक शेयर एंड सब्सक्राइब। और ये वीडियो आपके पास जब आएगा 4 नवंबर को, तब यूएस एक दिन पीछे होगा, एक दिन यूएस, उसके बाद वाले दिन यूएस में होगा वोटिंग, और काफी लोगों की नजर। मगर जैसे डॉक्टर साहब ने अंत में बताया ना कि द शिफ्ट, ड्रामेटिक शिफ्ट इन द मेंटालिटी, दैट यू आर ओनली योर फ्रेंड, nobody else is for you. Everybody will talk of their own interest, and Bharat should talk of their own interest and do whatever they do for their own. Relying on anyone is going to be fatal in this modern day geopolitics which has turned into a real politics. तो मित्रों, आज के लिए इतना ही है, हमें इजाजत दीजिए। डॉक्टर साहब, आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद बातें करने के लिए। फिर से मिलेंगे, तब तक के लिए जय हिंद, जय भारत, नमस्कार।
Thank you very much indeed. Namaskar.